Is there,
Okay,
oh,
there we go.
okay. Okay, cool. I was just going to say some questions maybe to fill the time. Perfect. The next thing I'm going to talk about is share security user access. We have seen our help desk ladies have seen a huge increase in employees directly contacting, calling the share service desk, looking for their login information, looking to, how do they get access. So I want to make sure that everyone understands, and I want to just quickly walk through how making sure HR is following these steps, because a lot of employees are saying, "Oh, HR told me to contact you," and they're confused about the process. So I want to make sure that all HR knows that everything share security cannot be granted without the completed approved request form that can be found on the Share Info Center. I believe it's also on the DFA website as well. New share security requests, you need all the proper approvals, signatures, an active state email is required as a result of MFA. So please make sure, going back, touching on what Alok mentioned earlier, please make sure that all the data is verified. Our security team uses what's in personal data as far as the business email to verify and create the accounts. Please make sure that's correct. Please validate all information. Again, email is super important. The completion of all trainings. If you have HR access, you need to take Dwayne's HR admin. If you're going to get recruiting, you need to work with Sheila Zamora and her team at State Personnel and take the required recruitment trainings in ELM and with them. So just a little touch on that. And we cannot do anything without all of these things in place. And that goes for transfers as well. Losing agencies, if there's anything higher than ESS, please send in a request to remove the high-level access roles. The hiring agency, again, send in a request form, even if they already have access, because we want to change their role level security, meaning we want to change their business unit to reflect the business unit that they're in. Again, verify job data, confirm the emails, and make any updates to their profiles. If someone separates from the state, which Mikhail's going to get into more, again, we're going to want any high-level access. Please immediately submit a form to remove that access if they separate, and that goes for transfers too. Please be mindful of the security that the employee has within the access they have from HR and finance. Please work with your finance teams in any of those cases. So with that's all I have to say on this subject. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mikhail to proceed.
Thanks, Vanessa. Hello, everyone. Yeah, Claudette, can you go to the next slide, please? Perfect. All right, I'm just popping in for a quick slide today. Just as Vanessa mentioned, I'm going to discuss terminated employees' access and share. So when a termination row is entered in job data, that employee has 30 days following that effective date to access Share HCM. So they can log in to view their timesheets, print their pay stubs, view any of their forms or benefit information, things of that nature. Now, if they had access beyond that, and like Vanessa was mentioned earlier, they had access to query viewer or the ability to update task profiles, and that form wasn't submitted, there is a job that runs every 30 minutes that will remove those roles. But it is better, as Vanessa said, to get those in as soon as possible. So please submit that form. Now, we strongly recommend as part of your offboarding process, to get with that terminated employee and have them update their phone number for MFA purposes. So having them submitting a ticket to update from that state issued phone number to their personal number. This just helps our help desk team facilitate these types of requests, and we don't have to reach out to your agencies to check if these are legitimate. So we yeah, we strongly recommend you start incorporating that into your offboarding process. So yeah, short and sweet from me today. If there are no questions, I'm just gonna pass this over to Jim. Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon. Jim Hightower here. I just have a couple of things I want to bring up about work groups and time reporter data. And the first thing is with regard to work groups, just a reminder that all GovX employees should be assigned to one of three work groups. There's only three work groups that GovX employees should be enrolled in. The first one is EXH exempt, which is for all the FLSA exempt GovX employees. And then the next two, the OT40 and the OT40 pay, would be for your non-exempt GovX employees. And the only agency that has an exemption from this rule is the State Racing Commission. And if you have any questions about how your GovX employees should be enrolled, you should contact Jennifer Veal, and the contact information is in the little box here. A couple of things about these three work groups. The first thing is that there's an auto-populate process that runs at the beginning of every pay period, and it will populate the schedule with reg hours. Sorry, it'll populate the timesheet with reg hours based on the work schedule for that employee. So you probably should review the work schedule that your GovX employees are assigned to. And the next thing is that these work groups only allow for a very small number of transactions to be entered. So, for example, with the exempt, there's no overtime, there's no comp time rule processing, nothing like that. So the number of TRCs that are allowed or that you'll see in the drop-down list will be very limited. One thing that we noticed recently is that there's about 175 employees who are in non-GovX work groups, and these need to be corrected because they're getting paid incorrectly, or they could be paid incorrectly. And the way that you can identify these people is you can run this query, NMSTL maintain tier data underscore BU. And when you run that query, it'll give you your active employees, and then you can filter on the GovX SAL plan, and then also filter on the work group that comes up, and you'll see if you exclude these three work groups from the filter, then you're going to see employees in your business unit that are in the wrong work groups, and they should be corrected. So to correct these work group assignments, just another reminder, and this goes for any work group changes, you should make the work group changes effective the beginning of the pay period. Because if you make a mid-pay period change, then there can be exceptions generated, and basically the system won't know exactly how to pay the time that has been entered if you enter a mid-pay period change to the work group. Now, obviously, an exception to this is if someone is hired, rehired, or transferred from another business unit. That's obviously a different situation. But so just a reminder, make it at the beginning of a pay period if you can. And that's all I have.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I have two different topics. The first one is temporary employees. And this is just more a reminder on temporary employees because we have been working with the Healthcare Authority and with retirement on some of these employees. For benefits, a temporary employee who has been employed for 6 or more months and who works a minimum of 20 hours per week must be offered benefits at the beginning of their 6th month. This isn't something that's optional. It is something that that you have to offer to be in compliance with the HCA admin guide and also the Affordable Care Act. If the temp employee is in an NB 180 position, meaning they're in the non-benefited position, they must be moved into a one-year temp position, or the position itself must be reclassified to a one-year temp position. The NB 180 position does have restrictions on enrollments into benefits, and so even if they are offered benefits, the system won't allow for enrollment into all the benefits, and which is why they need to be moved into one of those one-year temp positions. As for retirement, employees who have been employed for 9 or more months and who work a minimum of 20 hours per week must prepare at the beginning of the 9th month. Again, this is something that is required. The only exception to this is for student employees. If you have a question on that, you can see this in the member handbook available on the Para website, or you can reach out to Para, or you can reach out to us and we'll give you who to contact at Para on that.
Audrey, before you move on to the next slide, can you check your microphone? Your voice just became very weird.
Okay, can you hear it now?
Well, we can hear you, but it's modulated. So
Yeah, it's really muffled. You're coming across like staticky. You're not coming very clear.
Yeah, I'm using my headphones. I'm not sure. Let me try turning it off.
it's a Monday, everyone. Welcome to Monday.
Is this any better?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I don't know what was going on there. Let me know, just butt in if it happens again and I can see if I can fix it again. All right. Next slide, please. All right. So this is a little bit of a trickier topic. Hopefully it's something that I can communicate well here, but if not, we can talk later about maybe doing some more in-depth stuff. But I wanted to go over joining queries using the XLOOKUP formula in Excel. So we do get a number of requests to add additional information to existing queries, or we get requests to create new queries altogether. We don't always grant these requests because modifying an existing query oftentimes can make the query unstable. It can make it run exponentially longer. It can make the SQL behind the scenes more complicated and make the query run inefficiently, or it can just make it way too cumbersome. So we don't always want to do that. The other thing is we have way too many queries that give small variations on the same data. So we don't want to add to the query inventory because we already have enough out there. You know, sometimes you'll look for a query and it'll have underscore department. So it just takes the same query that's already out there and it just adds the department to the data. Not saying that's not necessary, but we have too many versions of the same data out there. So what we want to go over today is a tool that you have available to you, which is the XLOOKUP function, which is available in Excel and Google Sheets. So next slide, please. So the XLOOKUP function can join data from 2 different queries, but you have to have a common field and you should have a one-to-one relationship. So let's say you want to add an employee's business email address to a list of your current active employees and you can't find a query that will give all of that in one. So here's an example of 2 queries that have the different sets of data. So you have all of your active employees available on the org list report query. And then you have the business email addresses available on the query listed there, the HR business email address. So in Excel, what you'd want to do is you'd want to copy the data from the business email query and paste it to a separate sheet on the org list query spreadsheet. And we'll show that on the next slide. Okay, so here's one Excel workbook. And on sheet 1, you have the data from the org list report. And on sheet 2, you have the data from the business email address query. All right, now it's not shown on this screen, but if we were to scroll over to the right on sheet 1, employee ID would be one of the fields listed there. We'll talk more about that in just a sec. So next slide, please. So to join data on the two spreadsheets using the XLOOKUP function, you need to have a key data field that you can use to match the data up. And you probably guessed it, we're talking about the employee ID. That is the identifying piece of information on both of those sets of data that you can use to join the data together. So that is what we call a key. Okay, so both of them contain the employee ID, and what we're wanting to do is pull the email address onto the employee's line of data on the org list query. So the standard formula for XLOOKUP is where you say equal to XLOOKUP and then start parenthesis. And then you're going to have your key field 1, which would be the employee ID from your sheet 1. And then you'd have the key column, not field, but column from your sheet 2, which would be the column of employee IDs. That's the field you're matching to. And then your data column from sheet 2 containing the data you want. In this case, the business email address. So let's go to the next slide and you'll see that played out in real time, which is if you see at the top of the screen here, we have the formula where it says equals to XLOOKUP, begin parentheses, V2, which is on sheet 1, the employee ID field. And then we reference sheet 2, column C, which is the employee ID field. So that's where we wanted to find a match. And then comma, sheet 2, column E, that contains the email address, which if it finds a match, that's the value we want to display on the sheet. So go ahead, next slide, please. And so once you hit enter once you close the parentheses and hit enter, it will pull up, if there is a match, it will pull up the email address into that column. And then in order to populate that field for everyone or to copy the formula down, you simply click on the bottom right-hand corner and you can either double click on it to fill all the rows automatically, or you can drag it down to fill as far down on the column as you want. So a couple things to note, this is a very basic XLOOKUP function. There are more advanced ones that you can use. If you're working with a large data set, it may take a while to process. And then I also recommend that if you do use XLOOKUP, once you have completed the formula and you've applied it to everyone you want, that you copy that column and paste it into another column as values and get rid of the formula, because if you want to then go back and try to sort this data, because it has that XLOOKUP formula in there, it will take a long time to sort. So my advice is to copy the data you want, paste it in a separate column as a value field, and then go back and delete the column that contains the formula. And then once you do that, then you can sort the data and it won't hang up your Excel. All right. I believe that's our last slide. Thank you. Are there any questions for any of us on any of that?
Yes, there was a question from Amanda. She's asking, are judicial employees included in GovX?
No. Judicial employees are part of the court's AOC.
Yeah. So only executive branches should have GovX employees. Lisa is, nope, everybody else is saying that your sound had broken up. Okay, so here we have. Would it be possible in the future to receive a copy of the slides prior to the meeting so we can make notes, etc.? That's kind of hard to do when we don't know who all is going to be attending. So we tend to send out the slide deck after the meeting so that it goes to the people that attended and it doesn't go to people that did not attend and won't know what the slide deck is for. In the future, you can reach out to Central Payroll and ask for a copy of the slide deck before the meeting, and we could potentially give it to you then. It's just we don't want to send it out to everybody on our mailing list if they're not attending the meeting. So, any other questions?
If we don't have any other questions, I did want to note that, we are thinking about doing a separate meeting, not separate recurring meeting, but like a one-time training just on some other Excel tips and tricks that as pertains to especially query data. Or if you have any questions with XLOOKUP or any other data questions, our team is pretty savvy with Excel, and we're happy to answer any questions if you're having trouble maybe putting data together from separate sources.
Thank you, Audrey. I think that's an excellent idea, and I know some payroll staff that would be more than happy to take that training when you send it out. So, okay, let's move on. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending. My name is Audrey Beck. I am the Central Payroll Bureau Chief. If there's anybody here who doesn't already know that, I think most of you are aware. Thank you for bearing with us today. As some of you may have noticed, we did lose Alex Guzman as our training supervisor, and Claudette Romero is stepping in to serve some of the functions that he was serving in the meantime. So we're kind of going through a little pains, but that's okay. We'll struggle through it. Claudette's doing a fabulous job, and while we miss Alex and wish him all the best in his new role, we will continue to try and bring you these updates. That's one of the reasons why we did not cancel this. We wanted to go ahead and meet our obligation to continue to hold the quarterly meetings, and we will continue to do this in the future. Just bear with us as we struggle through this period of transition. So let's go ahead and get started on the payroll side. The first thing that I want to address is retroactive additional pays. And some agencies have already seen this, where if your agency is submitting an additional pay that is retroactive, and you're only giving me, for an example, a description of a TRET that became effective from 7/5/20, that should be 25, sorry, that's a typo, 7/5/25 to 6/30/26, then you are going to get a denial from me. For these actions, and they'll say SPO or DFA approve these. Anytime there is a retroactive additional pay, DFA is approving for budget validation. So when you say SPO and DFA approved, that indicates to me that you have budget authorization. It does not indicate that the action will actually be processed by payroll. Payroll looks at different things. So we have to go by the statutes as they relate to retroactive pay. And if you will notice there, it says that retroactive pay increases and performance bonuses are prohibited by the New Mexico Constitution because they actually constitute extra compensation for services already performed. And this is a violation of Article 4, Section 27, and the anti-donation clause in Article 9, Section 14. Retroactive pay increases or bonuses are considered gifts or donations of public money, and that is unconstitutional. So CPB will be requesting supporting documentation showing that these requests were made, for instance, prior to the 7/5/25 date. So I know with the SPO changes that were in effect in August, a lot of these actions were put on hold pending the SPO transition in the system and then being able to get things adjusted appropriately according to where they fell in the pay bands, the minimum pay rates, and a lot of those other items that were addressed after the SPO changes were input. So I need to know exactly why this request is being done, because if it's going back into a large period of time, we are not going to approve it. Most of the requests for additional pay we see are the results of either paperwork being delayed by SPO for authorization, or it was incorrectly input, or it was inadvertently missed and never got input. Those are all acceptable explanations. But if you give me an explanation that simply says SPO and DFA approved this particular action and a date range in which they approved it, and there is no other supporting documentation, it will be returned. You will see in the notes this reason for returning it, because it does violate the New Mexico Constitution, and you will need to resubmit it with a more appropriate description as to why this is being done, and potentially any backup documentation you have to prove that. So just letting you know, if you see that particular phrase being returned to you, that is what's going to be required in order for us to approve that additional pay and actually input it into the system. Next slide, please. One of the things that we are starting to see issues with, and some agencies may not be aware of it, in January of 2025, the state actually transitioned all of the National Guard employees from being paid through the accounts payable module to being paid through HCM. And this was done because the statutes actually require us to treat the National Guard employees as state employees. So prior to this change in the system, employees could only have one active position in job data. Because of the temporary nature of the National Guard, they may now have a full-time position with the state agency and a National Guard position. So it is imperative when a new employee is hired that the agency review the job data to verify that they do not have an active National Guard position. If an active National Guard position is set up as an employee record 1, then the agency will need to set up the new position with the employee record of 0. If the National Guard position is set up with 0, then the new position should be set up with a 1. And if you can go to the next slide, you can see an example of that. So this particular person, you'll notice up top where it says employee record 0, and then the position is actually a National Guard position with military affairs. And then they have an employee record 1 as a correctionals officer with the Department of Corrections. This employee actually gets paid on 2 different jobs. So if they are working, if they're deployed for National Guard, and they will get paid for that National Guard deployment through the state, then they will get paid on employee record 0. If they are working as a correctional officer, their hours will be paid as employee record 1. It will actually generate 2 different timesheets, and we will actually pay them technically 2 different checks. So it's very, very important that you check to make certain that you're not going to be overriding an employee record 0 that's actually a National Guard's record if you're setting up a new employee. So it's just a reminder that we now do have potentially 2 different employee records, where one is an active full-time state employee and the other is a National Guard record. And we want those 2 records to be maintained separately and distinct from each other. Any questions on that? Yes, Kiki, we can discuss the state police offline. That would be perfectly fine. Just reach out and we will be happy to assist you with that. Okay, so this is a large topic of conversation right now. As we all know, we are in tax season. Employees receive their W-2, they're starting to file their tax returns, they're seeing large returns, and so they're coming in wanting to change their W-4. Additionally, there are some employees that were actually required to have submitted a new W-4 by February 15th. So if they were a non-resident alien or an employee that was claiming exempt, they should have provided a new W-4 for tax year 2026. If they did not, then we must move them into the highest withholding that is available in the system. So if you had an employee that filed exempt for 2025 and did not bring you a new W-4 before February 15th, they should be changed to a single with no deductions on their W-4. And it will remain that way until they provide you with a new accurate W-4. The non-resident aliens, they're a little different. They do need to provide you with a new W-4 indicating at the top that they are a non-resident alien and completing the W-4 as it applies to their circumstances. We did go over that in depth in our last quarterly training, so I'm not going to revisit that at this time. But if you would like additional information on it, you can review the quarterly training from last quarter as it applies to the non-resident aliens. Please go back. Please go back. Thank you. Otherwise, if they're not an exempt employee or a non-resident alien, they may be bringing you a new W-4 because, as I have stated, they have received a large tax refund and now they want to adjust or change their withholding status in order to ensure that they get the benefit of lowering their tax deductions throughout the year. So on a W-4, steps 1A, B, and C are required to be completed. Pretty self-explanatory. 1A is your first and last name, 1B is your social security number, and C is your status, whether you're single, married filing separately, married filing jointly, or head of household. That is the very top part of the W-4, and you will notice that there is a tip there that says, please consider using the www.irs.gov/W4 app to determine the most accurate withholding for the rest of the year. This is very, very important, especially as we start talking about people trying to file exempt. In order to actually adjust your W-4, you would probably want to complete steps 2 through 4 only. Otherwise, if you're just a single person with no additional jobs, no additional exemptions, you could just complete the top part and move on to step 5. I have highlighted in green here, married filing jointly. So if you'll go to the next slide. If they are married filing jointly, step 2 is where they should indicate this. This also applies if an individual is working a second job. So there is a box in step 2, which you will see to the right of C, that if they just check that box, that will automatically indicate to the system that there is a second source of income that needs to be considered when it is calculating their withholdings. Several people may actually find that they owe large tax amounts because they are not telling the system that there is a second job. They're saying, I am married, I have a spouse, and that has a higher standard deduction But if their spouse is also working, then that could potentially mean that they're not withholding at an appropriate level. And they would need to check that box in order to tell the system that there is indeed a second income that needs to be considered when you're looking at what to generally withhold from a basically straightforward W-4. So that is what would happen in step 2. So let's go ahead and move down to steps 3 and 4. So next slide, please. So steps 3 and 4 are your child dependent credits, and you'll see that is the box in blue on the W-4 side. If there is an amount there, that means that they have child and or dependents that they get an additional allowance for, a reduction in their taxes. So they would put that dollar amount there. Generally, you can do it 2 ways. You can enter the number of qualifying children under age 17, multiply them by 2,200 and put that in box 3A. And then if you have a child over the age of 17 that lives with you, you would multiply them by 500, add the two together, and that would give you the amount for step 3, which is the blue box. The easier way to do it, because most people are not going to be adjusting their W-4 until they have completed their taxes, is to simply take the amount on line 19 from their 1040. That is the blue arrow that's shown on the 1040, line 19. Put that amount right there into that blue box, and that will provide you with that deduction. For step 4, you actually have 3 different boxes. And it's interesting because 2 of those boxes are additional withholding, which is A and C. And in the middle, sandwiched between that, is deductions, which is a very weird way for them to do it, but that's how they did it. So in box A would be if you have other income not from a job. So if you have a large amount of interest, dividends, stock options, something that you're actually getting. Maybe some people have, I don't know, they've inherited a lot of money, and they're just rolling in additional income. They would put that in box A to have that considered when the system calculates their additional withholding. Step C is if you don't want to indicate what that is and you just want to tell them, I want you to withhold an extra $50 each paycheck or an extra $200 each paycheck. Now, anything that you put in box C needs to be the amount you want withheld from the pay period. Some people will put, I want extra withholding of $2,000, thinking that they want $2,000 per year, but staff have to actually input what is in box 4C. So if they put in extra withholding of $2,000, then there is the potential for some employees to have a $0 check because the system will withhold an additional $2,000 from their paycheck on top of all of the other deductions that are already being taken. So anytime an employee has a large amount in 4C, we definitely need to get clarification as to whether that is on a pay period basis or whether that what they were indicating on a yearly basis, so that they could put in the correct amount into that box, and our backup documentation will support what is in our system. Box B is the best place for employees who are getting benefits from the One Big Beautiful Bill. And the amounts to add in box B actually come from the worksheet that is provided with the W-4. It is a rather lengthy worksheet, but an easier way to do it is to simply take line 14 and line 20 from your 1040 and add them together, and that's the amount that you would put in box B. Most of the time, the amounts in box B should be higher than the standard deduction. So if you are a single person, I believe the standard is 15,750. That would mean that your deductions would need to be higher for you to get any benefit from box B. It would need to be higher than 15,750 if you're filing single. If you are married, it would need to be higher than the 31,500 to be able to get that. Now, box 14 is going to have your standard deduction plus your overtime, your deduction for your overtime. It would have your deduction for your car interest. And if you or a spouse have tips that are covered also under the One Big Beautiful Bill, it would be in box 14. Box 20 deals with if you have credits for solar, if you have any type of credits for electric vehicles that aren't addressed in your interest. So all of your special credits there would be addressed in box 20. So by adding 14 and 20, you're actually getting the full amount of all of those extra deductions that you're allowed to take over the year to help reduce your tax withholding. Next slide, please. So when you go to input the W-4 into HCM, you essentially follow the color coding that I have shown. So your tax status up on box C at the very top would go into the tax status box that I have single in. If you have checked the box down in step 2, there's a box that says multiple jobs or spouse works that would also need to be checked. If you have dependent care and you have an amount there in the blue box, it would go into the dependent amount in HCM. If you have other income from jobs, the gray box, it would go into the gray box, other income in HCM. The additional deductions from the yellow box would go into the deductions box where it's indicated. And extra withholding, again, that one's red because we really need to pay attention to make certain that if that extra withholding is being utilized, it is on a pay period basis and not the yearly amount that they want to have withheld. Next slide, please. So the next step on the W-4 is the lovely request to file exempt from withholding. And unfortunately, employees believe that if they are getting a refund that they can claim exempt on withholding. And that is not the case. There are very few employees that actually meet the requirements to be exempt from withholding, which are that they cannot have any tax liability in 2025. So they would have had to have completed their 2025 tax return. And on line 24, where it says total tax, it would have to be a 0. If there is even $1 on line 24, they cannot file exempt. Additionally, they have to indicate that they are not going to have any tax liability in 2026, which generally from the IRS, they'll look at the standard deduction of $32,200 and say, is your income higher than this? If your income is higher than this, then there's a special worksheet that they can work out where those deductions, that yellow box, would come into play. But for the most part, you can look at an employee and say, 32,200 equates to $15.48 per hour. The state's minimum wage is $15 per hour. So most employees are not going to be exempt. They are going to have a tax liability. The refund comes from the amount of the withholding, the additional student loan savings that they get below line 24, the earned income credit that they get below line 24. There are numerous additional credits that they can have below line 24, which could reduce their tax liability, but it does not force them into or allow them to be in an exempt status because they still had a tax liability in 2025. So if an employee checks that box, then you can actually request the tax return to show that total tax on line 24 was 0. Next slide, please. And finally, the W-4 must be signed by the employee. And you will notice that when they sign that, it states under penalties of perjury. Now, we have questioned people who have claimed exempt, and they're like, well, I will deal with the IRS extra fees for not completing my W-4 correctly. The problem is that they are saying under penalty of perjury that their W-4 is correct and accurate. And there is a New Mexico statute that says perjury consists of making a false statement under penalty of perjury that is material to the issue or matter involved in the course of administrative matters, knowing such a statement to be untrue. And whoever commits perjury is guilty of a fourth-degree felony. So it is not just a matter of I'm going to pay the extra fees that the IRS is going to impose. They are essentially committing a fourth-degree felony if they sign their W-4 saying they are exempt when they are not exempt. So we would much rather have them utilize those other 4 boxes that are available to them to reduce their tax liability as opposed to saying that they are exempt. Next slide, please. So agencies can refuse a W-4 for any of the reasons that are shown. So if the form is invalid, meaning the form is missing some of the required information, like the social security number, the signature, the filing status. The form has been altered. So if they decide that they want to scratch out that under penalty of perjury, then we should be refusing to accept that form. False information. So if the employee indicates verbally or in writing that the information is false. And this one is generally in relationship to people who say, I want to change my W-4 to exempt for this next pay period because I'm going to be paying out my sick leave and I don't want taxes withheld. That is a fault. That means that they are filing under false pretenses. So they're illegally claiming exempt and they're giving a false W-4. Both of those we can deny for. Additionally, if there is an IRS lock-in letter, we cannot change a W-4 regardless of what the employee requests. So there are action steps that need to be taken if the W-4 is invalid. First, you do not use it. You set it aside and you tell the employee that you cannot accept it. Ask the employee to submit a corrected W-4 and default the withholding to the last valid form that they presented to you. If this is a first-time employee, then you would default them to single with no deductions until such time as they provide you with a valid W-4. You would also keep the invalid W-4 to document the request for a new one. Any questions on W-4s? So Plinky is saying for the W-4s, are our representative agencies required to facilitate or ensure that non-residential aliens have special withholding? Consequently, are we required to do audit for employees who need to have special withholding for non-resident aliens? Plinky, anytime you have a non-resident alien, as I stated, they are required to submit a new W-4, and non-resident aliens are supposed to present a new W-4 by January 1st. So yes, if you have a non-resident alien, you would be required to audit them to make certain that they are in compliance with the rules around W-4 and their reporting. And I'm not certain who your respective agencies are that would be that you're asking about. Most agencies have HR staff. So yes, they would be responsible for ensuring that they have set them up in HCM properly according to the non-resident alien status to have that special withholding taken. I hope that answers your question. If it didn't, we can meet offline to discuss your questions and come up with some solutions for you. Luz is asking if a spouse is retired, does this not apply? Correct. Luz, if a spouse is retired, I would definitely indicate that you have additional income. Not that they are working, but that you do have additional income, which is that gray box. Or you can go ahead and choose the red box as an option instead and say, I just want the additional $50 withheld. Because oftentimes, if a spouse is retired, they have potential Social Security penalties based upon any income that would be deemed as their earnings, and they may not be aware of it. So if a spouse is retired, they can go to the IRS calculator. That would be my first response to them, would be to go to the IRS calculator that was shown through that link, and have them actually walk through that IRS calculator to determine whether or not they need to make any adjustments to their W-4 to avoid being under withheld, in which case they would incur penalties and interest, or being over withheld and giving the government a tax-free loan throughout the year. We don't give tax advice, but we can definitely advise them to go to that IRS calculator to determine what would be in the best interest of them when completing their W-4. Any other questions? Can an employee enter a dependent amount into box 3 even though they do not have children? Actually, they can if, for instance, they have a parent that lives with them, a grandparent that lives with them, some other person that lives with them, and they provide more than 50% of their annual support, meaning that any earnings this other person has or any benefits that this person receives is less than 50% of the cost of their yearly survival. So as long as you can prove to the IRS that you provide 50% of their support, you can put them in box 3. Now, the amount of the deduction for them is only $500. It is not the $2,200 that you receive from a child under the age of 17. And they need to be aware of that. Now, if it is a child under the age of 17, even if it is not their child, they would get that child benefit as long as they can prove that they are indeed supporting them more than 50%. Most children have child support, so you would really have to look at that. Yes, the recording will be available to review. We will try and get it up, saying probably tomorrow, because we'll want to review it and make sure that we caught all of the information before we post it. Susan is asking, can employees change their dependent amount at will as often as they'd like? For example, if they know they may receive a large TLV payout or something similar, they may ask to increase their dependent amount to have less taxes taken. And to me, that's the way it was done in the past. We're not questioning any of those boxes. That is between them and the IRS. The one that really causes issues is when they file exempt, because the IRS can ask at any time for employees that are claiming exempt. They're not going to ask us how many employees say they have dependent care, or how many employees have additional deductions. They don't ask for that, but the IRS will come and ask for copies of W-4s for all employees that are filing as exempt. So that exempt status is really a flag that if we can avoid, then we should be avoiding. But otherwise, yes, they will be able to put, unless, of course, they indicate to you that that's not a true statement. And then it falls into a reason why you can refuse the W-4. So if they say, I have no children, but I'm going to claim $4,000 in dependent care, then, you can say, okay, well, who are your dependents if you have no children? And you can refuse to accept that W-4. Anytime they make a statement that would indicate to us that they are not giving us factual information on the W-4, we can refuse it and do not have to accept it. Any other questions around the W-4? All right, moving on. Next slide, please. So while we're talking about withholdings, which is what the W-4 generates, central payroll does not refund withholding taxes after payroll has completed. Any excess taxes withheld will be included on the W-2 and can be claimed on the employee's tax return. We will not refund if somebody says, I meant to change my W-2 and I didn't get it changed, and you withheld $500 from me and I shouldn't have any, so can you refund that? The answer is no. We will not refund it. The only exception is if HR input the W-4 information incorrectly. So for instance, if they had said in box 3B that they wanted additional deductions or deductions of $4,000, and instead you put it in the red box, the additional withholding, and therefore they did not get a paycheck. Under those circumstances, we would refund the taxes, and what we would actually do is void their check and reissue them a corrected check, which is in essence refunding. But if there is nothing wrong with the check and they simply want a refund of payroll withholding taxes, we do not refund payroll withholding taxes. FICA withholding, if, for instance, an employee is out on leave and they only have 8 hours of pay, and they have insurance and para and other things that come out of that 8 hours of pay, and therefore all of their FICA taxes cannot be taken, the system will automatically adjust FICA when they return to work. So corrections to FICA withholdings are made by the system automatically. If an employee was over or under withheld on FICA, the system will adjust it in the next paycheck. Again, the non-resident aliens have special rules, and it is imperative that these employees are set up correctly to avoid any adjustments that need to occur. All tax information is shown on the W-2s, and there was a new code, which I don't believe we actually notified agencies about. So some employees will see on their W-2 in box 14 an OBBBOT. This is actually the amount that they can deduct for overtime because of the delay in guidance from the IRS. A lot of people are having to actually go back and pull all of their timesheets and see how many hours they worked overtime, what they were paid for each one, divided by 3 for each pay period, take 1/3 and add them all up throughout the year. So we actually did that for our employees, and it is coded as OBBBOT on their W-2. So our employees, if you see employees that are requesting, for instance, I need to see all my pay stubs, I would ask them, are you trying to calculate your overtime earnings for deduction? And if so, let them know that on their W-2, that one code is the amount that they can reduce their tax liability or their income by in order to not pay taxes on it, because we did do that work for them. Thank you to the share team for that. Next slide, please. Duplicate W-2 request. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really am very appreciative of the fact that agencies seem to have followed our request this year and did not take requests for duplicate W-2s until after February 15th. Last year, between February 15th and February 28th, we had over 800 requests for duplicate W-2s. This year, we've had about 120. So it is a significant difference when people are asked to simply wait to make sure they get it in the mail before they request that duplicate. I did not see any requests for duplicate W-2s that were taken in January. I did notice that agencies were very much following our guidance, and I myself am very appreciative of it because I'm the one that has to do most of those. So thank you very much. Excellent job. We are getting duplicate W-2s out to people within 48 hours. So the ones that are actually needing a duplicate and you're taking the request for, once it hits the FSS system, we are meeting the goal with most of those of getting them out the door within 48 hours of that request. Additionally, some of you may be getting calls from people saying, I'm getting a W-2 and I've never worked for the state, or I haven't worked for your particular agency for 5 years. Why did I get a W-2? And that is because of the National Guard. Because the National Guard were put into HCM, they are receiving W-2s this year instead of 1099s. So if you get a question on why someone received a W-2 when they're not a state employee, it is generally because they are National Guard. You can refer them to me if you don't feel comfortable answering it, but usually that's the first question out of my mouth when they say, I got a W-2 from the state and I don't work for the state. I ask them, did you serve in the National Guard? Because if they say yes, that's generally the response right there. If their answer is no, then feel free to forward them to me and I can look to see what it is that is generating that W-2 for them. But most of the instances that I have come across has been because they are National Guard members who received some sort of supplemental pay early in the year and don't remember it and don't know why they're getting that W-2. If an employee notifies the agency that there is an issue with their W-2, please reach out to Central Payroll for assistance. If there is a Social Security number issue, those must be corrected immediately. So if somebody reaches out to you and says, my W-2 has a wrong Social Security number on it, we definitely need to get those corrected as soon as possible. And the first step would be that they would need to produce a valid Social Security card. So far, I think we've had 3 this year that had an invalid Social Security number that we have had to correct. We've also had those, several people will reach out and say, my health insurance wasn't deducted pre-tax. Why? those kinds of questions, if you can't answer them or you don't feel comfortable in answering them, you can always refer them to me. I can usually explain it to them rather quickly. So, don't feel like you have to spend a lot of time trying to answer a question if you don't know the answer. You can send them to me if there are any questions or concerns about a W-2. Next slide, please. F1 visa holders, because a lot of the F1 visa holders believe that they are not required to pay FICA taxes if they have been in the country for less than 5 years. The majority of them are required to pay FICA taxes because they simply do not meet the requirements to be exempt from FICA. So what I do is I refer them to the IRS website, which I have shown below. And that on that website, it has a Treasury Decision 9167. It is a PDF. It is a lengthy PDF. And page 4 of that decision begins to explain when a student is considered a student and when they are considered a career employee. Also on page 23 of that PDF, example 6 is the example that I would refer them to, because you will notice what that example is saying is that a student who is in some type of apprenticeship, skilled trade, internship program with an employer who is not a school, does the employment with that employer does not qualify for the exemption status because they are not part of the school or the university. So I don't argue with them. I simply provide them with this information. And then if they still, after reviewing this information, do not agree, next slide, please. I provide them with the steps to claim the FICA exemption refund from the IRS. They can actually follow those steps to request a refund from the IRS, and there is a link there that will provide them with a letter from Central Payroll explaining the state's position that they will need to attach to that request. So, I provide them with the information and I let the IRS make the determining decision. I have yet to have the IRS come back and tell us we need to refund their FICA. So until I actually get one where the IRS says that we determined it incorrectly, we will continue to follow these guidelines and these rules and regulations. Next slide, please. All right. I thank you. I'm going to turn over the rest of this to Claudette. Please reach out to Central Payroll if you have any questions or concerns. And I'll be back at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Claudette Romero, and I'm going to go over some health benefit updates. We have a few forms that we have updated on our website. One of them is it's the CPB form and benefit plan codes. So on the benefit plan code fields, we no longer have a drop down listing every single plan type. We have it now opened to where you can type and input, and we'll go over that a little bit in detail here in the next few slides. There are a few changes this year as far as dental benefits. We now have 2 dental providers, and our vision benefits has changed. So we want to ensure that when you're filling out the forms that we're looking at the correct years that we are filling the forms out for, and also make sure that the correct plans are listed. So again, we have Delta Dental, MetLife for the dental benefits, and our vision provider changed from iMed to Davis Vision. So on our new forms, as indicated before, we now have instead of a drop down, we have a benefit plan code where you can type in your information. So it's going to be, you're going to input the benefit plan code right here. So it's going to be press EE, Blue Cross Blue Shield, so on and so forth. And then I'm going to show you where we can locate the information within HCM. So to locate your information, you would go to Menu, Benefits, Enroll in Benefits, and then you're going to go Health Plan Enrollment. You're going to select your plan type, which would be medical, and then you're going to locate the benefit plan field, which is right here. And this is just an example of what one would look like. So I'm going to show you in HCM, once you go to Menu Benefits, Enroll in Benefits, Health Plan Enrollment, you're going to see right here, it's going to say Benefit Plan. This is what we're referring to when we're asking for the benefit plan code. This is just the description of what type of plan that they're listed in. This particular employee is Press HMO, employee only, and they make under $50,000. So when we go to the state health plan benefit sheet, we're going to use that to distinguish what plan they're in. So some people are in the 80/20 plan. We have SEPA Group 1, SEPA Group 2, 3, and 4. So this description right here tells you that they're under 50. That this right here, SEPA 4, under 50, would indicate that this is an employee only under 50. And this is going to be where we find our benefit amounts. So I know it's a lot of information. So if you guys have questions, please feel free to reach out to myself. And then this is another screenshot of how to review in Review Paycheck what type of plan when filling out like additional pays. If you go Menu, Payroll for North America, Payroll Processing USA, you can go to Review Paycheck. That'll give you a lot of information as to what needs to be put on forms. Once you get to this path right here, we have our paycheck deductions. And there's actually right here, it's a little tab. If you click the tab to the right-hand side, it gives you all of this description right here. So you've got deduction codes, descriptions, class, amounts, and your plan type. This plan type is going to be important for all of your information that you're going to put on your forms. And if I go back a few slides, you'll see right here, this is where we get the plan code, the press EE. And these are the amounts that we're going to put on our sheets for an additional pay. So right here, for example, we're requesting that you put the benefit plan types that you type them in exactly as they are in HCM. So right here we have press EE. If it was Blue Cross Blue Shield, we would want it to say Blue Cross Blue Shield on all of your A's. So A, and A. And then your amounts that were on the sheets listed right here as well as right here. This is the information that needs to match on our forms over here. Okay. So I'm going to go on to my next slide, which is our Payroll 101 course. We have our Payroll 101 course that we're currently working on. That's going to give some information on how to complete payroll. We are in the works of finalizing that, so we should hopefully have that here at the end of March at the latest. But again, that is something that will be coming soon. And once it rolls out, we'll definitely let you guys all know. And then I also wanted to let you guys know that Central Payroll does have open hours where your agency can come in and they can ask any payroll related questions Wednesdays from 2 to 4. Alex and I used to conduct those. As he's no longer here, I'll still be conducting those from 2 to 4. You can feel free to use this link to log in at any point during the 2 to 4. I just ask that if you do come in, that you don't give any personal information out. You can give some vague information to just keep some privacy for the employees. We don't want to share any sensitive information, but we will answer any questions that you do have. If I don't have the answer, I will get the answer to you. And again, those are every Wednesday from 2 to 4. My contact information is listed above. I am available via telephone, email, also the Teams meet. You can hop on with me. If you see that I'm green and active, you can feel free to ask me a question. If I'm not available, I will get back with you. We do have our central payroll website, which is actually going to be worked on. We're working on all of our websites. So that'll be looking a little differently here pretty soon. And then we also do have a YouTube channel that has a lot of information as well. And that is all
Claudia, go
I
back
have.
to the to-do slide.
This one.
Yeah. So these are just a few things that agencies should take away from the training and be aware of. So any employee currently claiming exempt, we need to get a new W-4 on, or we need to adjust their withholding to a single zero by the next pay period. Also, we have asked that each agency needs to designate an FSS administrator. If your agency has not done so, please go ahead and select that administrator and then fill out the form submission system administrator access agreement and submit it into the FSS system. This really helps us to maintain the access to that system to make sure that the people who need the access get the access, and people that should not have the access no longer have it. Um, there are there's a lot of information in the FSS system, and we definitely want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to secure that information and ensure that people that should not have access to it do not have access to it. But the people that need it can easily go ahead and get that access, and that is done through the agency administrator. So if you have not already designated an FSS administrator, usually your HR manager or somebody within the HR department is that administrator. Occasionally it's a CFO, but really this is something that HR should be responsible for, since they're the point of contact with central payroll and should be providing us with all of that information. Another thing that we're asking, and we didn't really touch on it today, but if you have an employee that has passed away and payroll is still holding those funds, we do need to make every effort to get those funds to the appropriate parties, so that when we go to the end of the year audit, we are not sitting on a large amount of money that needs to be dispersed to beneficiaries. So if you have an employee who passed away and you still have not received a request for the disbursement for their final paycheck and their TLV, please make it a point to reach out to that family and let them know we are holding money for them, and we just simply need the documentation and the paperwork in order to turn those funds over to them. We've worked with our in-house attorneys to try and make sure that we have all of the required documentation needed to be able to release those funds without incurring a liability from the state for not releasing them to the appropriate party. So we have made a few changes on what is required in order for us to release that money, but it really isn't that much more difficult. So please, if you still have employees, beneficiaries that haven't been paid out, reach out to them, get the appropriate documentation, and get it over to payroll so we can get the money into the hands of the families that need that money. Thank you all for attending. It looks like you're going to get a little bit of time back unless there are some additional questions or conversations that people would like to have. Thank you all. I know this one was a little hectic. We hope to get those ironed out in order to ensure that the next one goes a little calmer. We apologize for the mistake, but that's what happens when you lose people that have been doing it. Heather's asking, is there a query that we can use to see which employees are claiming exempt on W-4s? I believe there is, Heather. Let me get back to you with that. I just don't know it off the top of my head. So, Claudette, if you'll make a note of that, we can look for the query. Is there a query we can? I don't know why it keeps doing that. I guess Alicia is asking the same question. So, Alicia, we'll get back to you as well on that. All right. Any other questions? Actually, Claudette, why don't you, once we find it, we'll just send it out to everybody that was in attendance, so that way everybody can get that that query once we get it. Okay, what is going on? Who is playing with these Q&A? If we have an employee that we know is in the National Guard, do we need to let you know? No, Anika, actually, Central Payroll gets a list of all National Guard employees on a regular basis, so we know who are the active National Guard employees, which ones are receiving pay. You don't need to do anything. Department of Military Affairs is very good at keeping that information current in the system. So it's just a matter of you being aware that they may have two jobs. So if you're terminating, make sure you terminate the correct job and not the National Guard job. If you're transferring, it really is just a matter of being aware that those two jobs are in there and making sure that any job actions that we're taking are being done on the appropriate job and not on the National Guard job. Any other questions before we let you go? All right. Well, thank you all for attending. I hope your week goes well. We will get the PowerPoint out to everybody that has been in attendance. We will get the recording up on our YouTube channel for people to access, and we will get the query over to you when we send out the PowerPoint presentation. If anybody has any additional questions or would like additional training, please reach out to Claudette or myself. We're always willing to address any issues that we can to help you. And if we don't know them, we can definitely find the person who can help. So I'm not going to say I'm an expert. I definitely reach out to my staff, but we are willing to help, and everybody in payroll is very collaborative. So if you have something that you need assistance with, please reach out to us. That is what we're here for, to help make your life easier, our lives easier, and ensure that the employees are paid accurately to the best of our knowledge. So thank you all. Have a great week, and we will see you next quarter.